What are you doing? I'm walking, a smooth male voice said, annoyance creeping into his tone. To where? There was a pause. To Konoha, he said, rolling his eyes upwards to try and see the large orange frog sitting on his head. Konoha? Why are you going back there? I thought you. Why do you keep showing up, Gamakichi? The man interrupted. I haven't summoned you. He felt the frog's front flippers on his forehead as he shifted, so as to place his orange face upside down in his eyesight. I like the company, Gamakichi said flatly. The man snorted. He would hardly consider himself good company. He knew that the frog really popped up randomly because he thought he could use the company. Gamakichi was still in his eyesight, looking at him, and the man used his forefinger to gently push him back onto his head, a silent invitation to stay. Neither frog nor man said anything for the larger portion of the day, mainly because the man had begun to run, leaping from tree to tree, and the frog had to concentrate his energy to hold onto his head. The man's hair was completely covered by a ninja forehead protector, which had been turned into a bandana, and without hair for traction, it was harder to hang on. The sun was dipping behind the horizon as he pulled to a sudden stop. Gamakichi would have flown from his head if he had been a normal frog. From his spot in a tree near the edge of the forest, he could see the gates of Konoha, tall and proud, and closed. With a sigh, he leapt from the tree. Bright blue eyes looked upwards, trying to see the frog on his head. The orange amphibian got the hint. Call me if you need me, kid, the frog said, disappearing with a puff of smoke. He snorted at the word kid, thinking the frog should have stopped using it 5 years ago when he reached the age of 20. Then, with a shake of his head, he moved towards the gate. The 2 guards stationed at the gate straightened as the stranger approached. They had never seen him before, and although he looked normal enough, in times such as these, with missing mean becoming more and more common, they had to be careful. There was nothing distinguishing about him. He wore deep navy blue pants, a shuriken holster on his right thigh. His shirt was the same color as his pants and was short-sleeved, revealing lightly muscled shoulders. His arms were wrapped from his biceps to the knuckles on his fingers. The bottom of his face was covered with a dark mask, very much like a jounin they knew. But, unlike him, this man's hair was completely covered by a hitayate, which, they realized with surprise, carried the symbol of the leaf. Can we help you? One of the guards, a chunin, asked. I need to see the Hokage, the stranger stated, a deep voice coming from under his mask. Both guards were transfixed by his eyes, a shade of blue neither had ever seen. He raised an eyebrow at their staring. With a cough, the chunin that had spoken first pulled his attention away from his eyes. Is she expecting you? He asked. I doubt it, he answered. I'm sorry, but it's important. The chunin hesitated. There was urgency in the man's voice that made him believe him. We'll have an umbu escort you, the chunin finally said, nodding at his comrade, who disappeared in a puff of smoke. We can't take any chances these days. The stranger nodded. I understand. As a chunin approached him after appearing in a puff of smoke, he looked up, not that the lower ninja could tell since he had his mask on. Sir, the chunin said with a bow. There is a stranger at the gate wishing to speak with the Hokage. The umbu captain didn't respond directly, and the chunin began to fidget, wondering if he had even heard him. Finally, he spoke. Did he say why? No, sir, but he claims it's important. We thought it would be best to have an umbu escort him through the village. There was another pause before the captain spoke again, a twinge of annoyance in his voice. We cannot allow every man claiming he needs to speak to the Hokage into the tower. If it were important, she would be expecting him, and she has mentioned nothing of it. Go back to your post and tell him no. This time it was the chunin's turn to pause. Yes, sir, he finally said before disappearing. The chunin these days weren't the brightest batch to ever grace Konoha, Sasuke thought, before. Continuing his rounds. When the chunin returned, the sun had fully set, and the first stars of the night had begun to twinkle. I'm sorry, but the umbu captain has refused to let you see the Hokage. The stranger heaved a loud sigh. This is what I get for trying to do this the nice way instead of just sneaking in, he muttered. Both the chunin tensed at his words. Okay then, the stranger said. Thanks for your help. The chunin's eyes widened as the stranger crouched low and leapt high above them before disappearing over the gate. Uchiha-san, Sasuke turned and saw the Chunin from earlier running towards him and rolled his eyes. He did enjoy the freedom his Umbu mask gave him. Uchiha-san, the man at the gate is in the village. What? Sasuke asked, his voice low. We informed him he could not enter, and he leapt over the gate. Sasuke didn't wait for further elaboration. He quickly ran through the tower, calling his Umbu to action and placing the building on full alert. After sending 2 Umbu to guard the Hokage, he made his way to the roof, watching his Umbu spread throughout the city, searching for the intruder. He didn't see anyone suspicious. Sharingan, he said, a quick seal going along with the word. If he hadn't been wearing his mask, anyone could have seen his normally deep gray eyes had turned blood red, 3 black dots around his pupils. There, Sasuke thought, watching a navy blue blur dash along the rooftops, heading towards the tower. He was fast, and Sasuke knew his Umbu would not be able to spot him, not without the help of the Sharingan. He began running towards the blur, leaping from roof to intercept him. Sasuke made it into his path, effectively blocking the man from continuing any further. The man stopped running. His momentum carried him, and he slid along the cement roof in a crouch until he gained traction and stopped. The stranger stood, folding his arms across his chest. The Umbu in front of him was completely covered in a black robe. His hood was up and the robe billowed around him as the wind picked up. He almost laughed at the Umbu's mask, which was in the shape of a fox, small wooden ears sticking up. Didn't anyone ever tell you it's rude to stand in front of someone who's running? The man asked. Sasuke frowned, not that the intruder could see. There was a tone in his voice. He sounded almost amused. Didn't anyone ever tell you that it's rude to enter someplace you haven't been invited? He couldn't see the intruder's mouth, but the way his eyes crinkled, Sasuke thought he must have been grinning. He sucked in a breath when he caught sight of his eyes. A brilliant azure blue blinked at him. It was a shade he hadn't seen in years. Suddenly Sasuke hated this man. Only one person was allowed to have those color eyes, and he was going to kill this man so he wouldn't have to look at them. As much as I'd love to play, the man said. I must be off. Sasuke tensed, dropping into a fighting stance as the man ran towards him. He wasn't prepared to see him leap over him, to the next roof, and continue running. Son of a, Sasuke said, twisting around and rushing after him. The man had made it into the tower before Sasuke caught up with him. How could he be so fast? Sasuke dove, catching the man around the waist. They fell forward, but the man was able to twist away from him and roll to his feet. Sasuke twisted in midair to land steadily. You're quick, the intruder said, sounding impressed. But I really don't have time for this. He dropped into a fighting stance. Let's get this over with. Those blue eyes were taunting him, and rage Sasuke hadn't felt since Itachi was alive boiled within him. Sasuke flew towards him, fist raised in a punch. The man dodged, aiming a high kick at his chest that Sasuke blocked. Fists and legs flew at one another, but the two men were almost equally matched. What the man lacked in the Sharingan he made up for with speed, and Sasuke found he couldn't lay a hit on him any more than the other could on him. They leapt apart, breathing heavily. What do you want with the Hokage? Sasuke asked, watching him carefully. Information. She wouldn't tell you anything. The blue eyes rolled. Not information from her. For her. Sasuke frowned behind his mask, dropping his guard slightly. For her. Yes. Next time you should ask before trying to beat the shit out of me, team. All reason left him at that. No one can call me that, he growled in a dangerously low voice. The blue eyes widened as the Umbu suddenly began focusing his chakra to his left hand, so much that it began to glow blue and sounded as if birds had entered the hallway and started chirping. His last coherent thought as the chakra-laden fist slammed him through the wall was, Sasuke. The Hokage and the two Umbu guarding her looked up in total surprise when a body crashed through the wall of her office. He slid along the floor, coming to a stop in front of her desk and out of her sight. Tsunade looked at the large hole in her wall to see her Umbu captain stride through, the remains of chakra still on his fist. All of those in the office were thankful he had his mask on, for the rage they could feel radiating from him made none of them eager to see the look on his face. Tsunade cleared her throat. Is this the intruder? She asked, unable to think of anything else to say. The Umbu captain nodded, but he suddenly tensed when the body in front of her desk, who should by all rights be unconscious for a few weeks, if not dead, began to move. The four people in the room watched in amazement as the navy blue-clad man stood shakily. Chidori? Overkill for calling you a bastard, don't you think? Sasuke was extremely grateful for his mask, which hid the fact that he was gaping open-mouthed at the man who didn't seem to have a mark on him. He was so confused the fact that the man knew the name of his jutsu went completely unnoticed. He recovered himself. Shall I try it again? Sasuke growled, chakra gathering again. The man turned from him. Tsunade Baba, he said quietly to the gaping woman behind her desk. I need to speak with you. She stiffened at the name, and then quickly stood. Uchiha, that's enough. The chakra immediately dissipated. Hokage-sama. Sasuke asked, confused. The two of you, leave me, she said to the other Umbu. Sasuke, find Jiraiya. The three Umbu obviously didn't understand, but they did as they were told. What are you doing back, brat? She asked when the Umbu were gone. Her voice was rough, but it was covering for some emotions the man couldn't decipher. He played along. Don't growl at me like it's my fault, he said, crossing his arms. I wasn't planning on coming back. Tsunade, what's going on? A gruff voice asked. Naruto looked over to the hole in the wall, watching. As a tall, sturdy man with long white hair steeped through, he had red lines running down his cheeks, looking like red tear streaks. Hey, Ero Sunin, the man said with a wave. Jiraiya stopped mid-walk and looked confusedly between the masked man and Tsunade. The twisted expression on her face was enough to tell him that nickname was not just a coincidence. What are you doing here? He whispered, resisting the urge to go hug the man. It seemed that Tsunade was doing the same. What a welcome, the blue-eyed man muttered. Sasuke came in from behind Jiraiya, moving over to the corner of the office and standing there quietly. Naruto couldn't see his face, but he could tell by the other man's posture that he was brooding. He smiled slightly under his mask. Some things have been going on. I thought they should be brought to your attention. We're aware of the sudden amount of missing Nins from all of the hidden villages. That's why you had such trouble getting to me, Tsunade said. Does the fact that I did get to you tell you anything about your security? Naruto said cheekily. Sasuke straightened and was about to lunge at him when Tsunade held up a hand. Naruto continued. Anyway, I'd have been severely concerned if you weren't aware of the situation. The question is, do you know where the missing Nins are? No one spoke. Akatsuki. Akatsuki was disbanded after the death of Itachi and the apprehension of 5 of the S-class Nins. Sasuke said. As a key player in the entire affair, he had witnessed the end of Akatsuki. I know, Naruto said, pulling something from one of the pouches around his waist. It was a forehead protector. He tossed it onto Tsunade's desk, and she picked it up to examine it. I was attacked the other day by a shinobi wearing this. He's one of Konoha's recent missing Nins. Tsunade handed the Hitai-8 to Jiraiya, a grim expression on her face. Sasuke could see the long horizontal scratch through the leaf symbol. Why did he attack you? Jiraiya asked. Actually, there were about 4 of them. They approached me first. They're recruiting. That's why there's the sudden excess of missing Nins. When I refused, they attacked. You didn't want to. Tsunade seemed to stumble over her words. Of course not, he said loudly. Just because the fox is evil doesn't mean I am. It hasn't taken me over, Tsunade Baba. Sasuke stilled. In a flash, he had pulled off his Umbu mask and had the other man pinned up against the wall by his neck. Reaching up, he pulled down the other man's mask. His blue eyes had widened, but he didn't struggle, mainly because he could barely breathe. Sasuke inhaled sharply when he saw the whisker marks he hadn't seen for 10 years. You, he hissed, hand tightening as red eyes bore into blue, are supposed to be dead. He was so close Naruto could feel his breath on his face, which served to remind him about his own lack of air. He will be if you don't let him breathe, Sasuke, Jiraiya said. Realizing how tight his grip had become, Sasuke quickly released him. Naruto coughed, glaring at him and rubbing his neck. So, Jiraiya said after Naruto regained his breath. Akatsuki sought you out again. They did before. No reason to assume they wouldn't this time around. How did they know you're alive? Tsunade asked. Well, since only you and Ero Sunin knew, and I don't believe you would have told anyone, my only guess would be that the man everyone believes killed me isn't quite as dead as we thought, and is correcting a few rumors. Orochimaru, Tsunade and Jiraiya said. The missing Nin are on the move. They've been moving steadily through the fire country. If Orochimaru is leading them, I have no doubt they are on their way here. He glanced at Sasuke, who was glaring at the floor with clenched fists. Okay, Tsunade said a while later. None of this is to be repeated. We do not need a panic on our hands. I will inform the Jounin. Sasuke, put your umbu on full alert. Naruto pulled up his face mask and prepared to leave. Where are you going? Tsunade asked. Wherever the wind may take me. Naruto said. You can't leave Konoha, Tsunade told him. What? Naruto said angrily. I came back here to warn you, not to be taken prisoner. We're not taking you prisoner, Naruto, but if Orochimaru is coming to attack, we could use your help. Also, you have to understand, if you leave and Akatsuki gets their hands on you, right? Naruto interrupted, his voice cold. I forgot what a powerful weapon I am. Sasuke noticed that despite his anger, the look in his eyes was hurt. Where am I going to stay? A box on the street? Tsunade paused. She hadn't given much thought to that. You can stay with me. Sasuke spoke up, and everyone turned to him in surprise. All of them knew Sasuke was not the most social of people. Good, Tsunade said, settling the matter. Naruto looked around the room, the beginnings of panic working in his chest. He didn't want to be here. He didn't want to stay. He knew they wouldn't let him leave easily. Sasuke and two Sennin were formidable opponents, and while he could probably outrun them, if they caught him, he wouldn't be afforded the courtesy of staying with Sasuke. He'd be thrown into a cell for who knew how long. With a defeated sigh, he nodded. Perhaps he could slip away once he was at Sasuke's. They hadn't spoken the entire walk to Sasuke's. It was late at night, and they ran into no one, something both men were thankful for. It was likely they wouldn't have been bothered, however, since Sasuke had managed to remain as unapproachable as ever, especially after becoming an umbu. Only a few people still attempted to reach out to him, mainly Sakura, a few other shinobis they had been jinnin with, and, of course, Kakashi. Naruto looked around when they entered the gates of what he could only assume had been a lively community of Uchiha at one point. It was quiet and empty, and he felt sad, not only for the people who had once lived here, but also for the man walking beside him, who remained in this deserted little corner of Konoha alone. Naruto followed Sasuke into his house, being led through the living room and into the kitchen that was next to it. The house had a sterile and used feeling to it. Naruto sat down at the kitchen table with a sigh, pulling his mask down. Sasuke had put his umbu mask on before they left the tower, and now the fox face was turned towards Naruto. If you're going to stare at me, at least have the courtesy to do it without the mask, Naruto said, not looking at the umbu that stood across the room. There was a pause and Sasuke pulled the wooden mask from his face, setting it on the counter he was leaning against. Naruto placed his elbows on the table. His head hung as he massaged the back of his neck. Sasuke said nothing. How long have you been in umbu? Naruto finally broke the silence. 5 years. Congratulations. Where have you been? Sasuke said roughly, surprising him. Blue eyes looked up, narrowed in thought. Sasuke crossed his arms, showing his impatience, but said nothing. I've been around. Mostly in the fire country. Sasuke glared at him. Why didn't you come back? You let us believe you were dead. Naruto didn't answer right away, a guarded expression on his face. It was better that way, he said. What could possibly be important enough to let us think you were dead? Do you have any idea what people went through? Iruka, Sakura, Kakashi, he stopped abruptly, but Naruto knew what the next word would have been. Me. It's a long story, Sasuke. Black eyes flared in anger, and Sasuke crossed the room in a flash, slamming his palms into the table in front of Naruto, who shrank back in surprise. That's not a good enough answer, dope, he hissed. Naruto's eyes widened then narrowed angrily as Sasuke's tone and insult got the desired rise out of him. Don't act like I owe you explanations, team, he spat out. You never thought twice about me back then. Don't try to pretend we're friends now. Sasuke straightened, and for a brief moment Naruto thought he looked hurt, but his general expression of indifference returned so quickly that Naruto had to assume he'd imagined it. So what really happened? Sasuke asked, his voice calm once more. Obviously Orochimaru didn't kill you. Sasuke, Naruto said softly, staring at his hands. I can't talk about this. I don't want to think. I don't want to remember. I did what I had to do. Please, he whispered. Please just drop it. Sasuke didn't bother to try and hide the surprise on his face. Naruto wasn't looking at him anyway. As much as Naruto's words made him even more curious than before, his tone and his broken voice stalled all questions Sasuke had. Naruto's personality seemed drained. He was quiet now, reflective. Nothing like the loudmouth dope he'd known as a teenager. Why had he changed? He didn't press further, but turned, pulling some things out of his barely used cupboards. Naruto didn't look up until a steaming bowl of ramen was placed in front of him. He stared up at Sasuke, confused. The other man sat down across from him, digging into his own bowl of ramen, not meeting Naruto's eyes. With a grin, Naruto picked up his chopsticks. Onoase, Onoase, what about Niji? Sasuke sighed in annoyance. As they ate, Naruto had begun to ask him about his old friends and Sasuke had been updating him for the last hour on the lives of Iruka, Kakashi, Sakura, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shikamaru, Hinata, and Lee. Thinking of all the others Naruto could ask about made Sasuke mentally groan. Dope, aren't you tired or something? He asked, all the while inwardly pleased that he was acting more like the Naruto he knew. No, Naruto said flippantly. I usually only sleep for 3 or 4 hours near dawn. Sasuke furrowed his eyebrows. Noting his confusion, Naruto explained. Early morning, less likely to get attacked. Do you get attacked a lot? Sasuke asked. Occasionally, he said. More so since Akatsuki's revival. They come around once a week or so. I'm waiting for them to send someone stronger though. You would think they'd get that I'm not coming without being forced. Sasuke frowned, but made no comment. If you're tired, Sasuke, don't let me keep you up. I'll go train or something. It was said extremely casually. Sasuke looked at him quickly. What? Naruto asked. Going to try and sneak off? Blue eyes widened. Naruto, I can't let you leave. Tsunade ordered it. What does that old hag know? Naruto asked angrily, standing from his seat. She doesn't want you caught by Akatsuki, Sasuke said, growing angry as well. She wants to protect you, you ungrateful idiot. She wants to protect the village, Naruto snapped. It's the fox she cares about, not Naruto. And she knows that it's better if I leave. Konoha is safer. What? Sasuke asked, said, not understanding what the other man meant. Nothing, Naruto said, turning. I'm leaving. I didn't want to come back here, and I sure as hell have no intention of staying. He stalked from the kitchen and towards the door. He stopped when Sasuke appeared in front of him, blocking his exit. Get out of my way, Sasuke, Naruto growled. I already told you, Dobe, I can't let you leave. I won't ask you again. Sasuke crossed his arms, unmoved. He was completely surprised when Naruto turned and sped towards the open window in his living room, leaping out. Dobe, he yelled, following. Naruto was fast, Sasuke knew, but Sasuke was by no means slow. With a quick seal his eyes were red, and he could see Naruto, not far ahead, heading towards the forest that surrounded the training grounds. With a leap, he was on the rooftops, trailing the navy blue blur in front of him. They made it from the rooftops to trees, and with a burst of speed Sasuke caught up to the other man, grabbing the back of his shirt and yanking him back onto the tree limb before he could continue. With a surprised oof, Naruto landed next to Sasuke. They glared at one another until Sasuke finally said, You've gotten fast. Cut the crap, Sasuke, Naruto said. I want to get out of here before dawn. I guess we'd better get started then, Sasuke said, dropping into his fighting stance. I don't want to fight you, Naruto said. Afraid? Sasuke asked, smirking. Not of you. For you. Confident aren't we? Sasuke asked. Some things never change, Naruto said, blue eyes twinkling for a moment. The only part of Naruto's face Sasuke could see since the man had pulled him mask back up. He dropped into his own stance. Okay, Umbu Captain. Let's go. They started quickly, flying at one another. Both were fast. Sasuke aimed a punch at Naruto's jaw. And Naruto ducked, using his momentum to swing around, attempting to kick the Umbu's legs out from under him. Sasuke's Sharingan allowed him to dodge, and he leapt to another tree limb in surprise as Naruto had pulled out several shuriken and sent them into the spot he had been standing on. Nothing would be accomplished fighting close range, Sasuke knew. They'd both continue blocking and dodging. Their fight earlier in the night had proved that. In that case, Sasuke muttered. His fingers flew into familiar seals. Gakakyu no Jutsu. With a deep inhalation, he sent a ball of flame at the other man, and with wide eyes watched as Naruto didn't dodge. The fireball hit him full on, and Sasuke watched anxiously as the smoke cleared, fearing he had hurt Naruto. He wanted to stop him, not kill him. He'd never expected Naruto not to dodge. As the smoke cleared, Naruto's figure became visible, still in his crouched position, head down and not looking at him. He stood, folding his arms over his chest. When Naruto met his gaze, Sasuke almost gasped. The red eyes of the QB were staring at him, but as he watched, they slowly receded to the brilliant blue Sasuke knew. Naruto laughed. "Come on, Sasuke, is that all you've got?" "Your eyes," Sasuke said. Naruto winked at him. "Are we done yet? I'd like to get going." "You're not leaving," Sasuke yelled. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise at the normally stoic boy's outburst. "You can't do this. You can't come back after 10 years of being dead and leave again." "Sasuke, I won't let you leave again," Sasuke said. "When I left, you came after me. I almost killed you, but for some reason, even when I was beyond hope, you believed in me. I've spent the past 10 years knowing that your death was my fault, that my decisions killed you. Now you're alive and I refuse to let you disappear again." Naruto looked away from him, and Sasuke couldn't tell if he'd gotten through to him or not. He nearly started in surprise when the blue eyes turned on him suddenly, glaring coldly. "How selfish," he said. "I don't want to be here. Why don't you understand that? I can't stay here. It's too dangerous. Besides, no one wants me here. I saw my funeral. I saw who went. More importantly, I saw who didn't. 3/4 of the village, Sasuke. 3/4 of the village celebrated my death." Even with the mask on, Sasuke could see the sneer on his face. "In Konoha, I'm Kyuubi. I'm a monster. A weapon to be used until I'm deemed too dangerous and sent on my merry way." He had to get Sasuke to let him leave, and if this was the only way, then so be it. "I hate this village and everyone in it, including you." It was quiet for a long time before Sasuke finally spoke. "So why did you come back to warn us? If you hate us so much, why not just leave us to our destruction?" Naruto looked conflicted for a moment before settling on angry. He leapt at Sasuke, and they resumed their dance of blocking and dodging. "I don't know what you are to the village," Sasuke grunted as they fought. "But to me, you're Naruto. My loud, blonde dope." If Naruto heard him, he didn't respond, continuing his assault. It was only when Sasuke saw tears in his blue eyes did he realize Naruto had indeed heard his words. The tears distracted him, and Naruto finally managed to land a powerful punch, sending the Umbu flying off the tree branch and slamming his head painfully hard into the trunk of the tree behind him, before falling heavily to the ground, unconscious. Naruto stood on the limb in surprise. He wiped his eyes and jumped down from the tree, landing in a crouch next to Sasuke. His dark hair was splayed about the grass, contrasting with his pale skin. His breathing was wheezy. It sounded like perhaps he'd broken a rib. Naruto stood, turning his back on Sasuke and preparing to leap off into the trees. By the time Sasuke woke, he would have put enough distance between him and Konoha that he wouldn't be found. Sasuke awoke with a groan. Sunlight cut into his eyes like a knife the minute he'd opened them, and the headache he'd had upon waking intensified. His whole body hurt, his head and chest especially. He confusedly looked around his room, wondering how he got into his bed. He shot up into a sitting position, remembering the fight. Naruto obviously had won. Naruto. He had to catch up to him, try and get him back. Ignoring his pain, he tossed the covers aside, jumping out of bed. He hurriedly pulled his pants on and grabbed his shirt, running into the hallway. He never even saw the other person in front of him before he crashed into him, sending them both flying to the ground in a heap. It took Sasuke a moment to do anything, for the pain in his ribs became mind-shattering at the collision. Taking deep breaths, he finally lifted his head from the other man's chest. His dark eyes widened as he looked into blue eyes and a whiskered face. The blonde-locked Sasuke knew he were still under his Hitayate. "Naruto." "Sasuke, with those special eyes of yours you would think you'd be able to look where you're going in your own house," Naruto said, raising his eyebrows in amusement. "I thought you were." "I was." Naruto looked to the side, suddenly finding the bottom of the wall to be extremely interesting. "But I couldn't just leave you unconscious in the forest." He turned back to Sasuke. whose face remained hovering over him, and smiled timidly. You shouldn't jar yourself like that, Naruto chastised, sitting up as well. He stood before leaning over and helping Sasuke to his feet. The dark-haired man draped an arm over his abdomen, and it was then he noticed the bandages that had been wrapped around his torso. He looked questioningly at Naruto, who didn't meet his gaze as he helped Sasuke back to his room. When Sasuke was sitting on the edge of his bed, Naruto finally spoke. Listen, I'm Sasuke-kun, a voice called out. Sasuke turned to see his former sensei crouching on his windowsill. His silver hair flew about as haphazardly as always, and as one visible lazy eye was trained on him. Turning back to Naruto, he noticed the other man had somehow managed to pull up his mask, effectively hiding most of his face and the whiskers that would give him away. Sasuke sighed. Any talk they were about to have was over. What, Kakashi? He said impatiently. Kakashi seemed to be amused, but of course, one never could tell when the only visible part of the Jounin's face was his right eye. Such disrespect for your elders, he said, shaking his head. Tsunade-sama sent me to get you. An emergency meeting has been called to discuss new information she's received. His eye moved over to Naruto, who was leaning casually against the wall with his arms crossed. Who's your house guest? He asked. The quick glance Naruto shot him was enough for Sasuke to understand he didn't want his presence in Konoha known. A temporary visitor. The Hokage asked me to let him stay while he is in Konoha. Kakashi wasn't quite satisfied with that answer. He saw the bandages the Umbu had on, and his sharp eye hadn't missed the look the mysterious man had given Sasuke. Also, why would a visitor be wearing the Konoha Hitaiate? He decided to let it go for now, opting to say, Welcome to Konoha. I like your mask. Arigato, the other replied with a slight bow. Yours is very nice as well. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Kakashi's attention returned to Sasuke, who stood rather jerkily. He was obviously in a bit of pain. I'll be there in a moment, he told the Jounin, pulling on his shirt. There was an obvious note of dismissal in his tone. Kakashi nodded, hesitating. He wanted to know more about this house guest and Sasuke's injury. However, as much as he was loath to admit it, Sasuke was his superior. Because he was the younger man's former sensei, Kakashi could often get away with questioning him. But there were days his patience was not to be trifled with, and Kakashi could sense this was one of them. I'll inform the Hokage, he told Sasuke before disappearing from the windowsill with one last glance at the masked man. When he was gone, Naruto spoke, but he left his mask in place, Sasuke noted. He was certainly obedient, wasn't he? I outrank him, Sasuke said, slowly putting on his Umbu uniform. Naruto didn't speak again while Sasuke finished dressing. The dark-haired man turned to him suddenly, slipping on his black robes. Are you going to try and leave again? He asked, watching him unblinkingly. Naruto appeared thoughtful for a moment. I suppose I should at least wait until you heal so you won't kill yourself coming after me in an injured condition, he finally said, his eyes crinkling in what was unmistakably a grin. Sasuke looked at him in surprise. He hadn't expected Naruto to cave so quickly, and he hadn't expected the other man would realize that if he tried to leave again, Sasuke would follow. You'll stay, he finally said. For now, yes. Only if you promise not to tell anyone else I'm here. Sasuke grunted in agreement, an action so like him Naruto nearly laughed. I better not come back to find an empty house. I'm not going anywhere, Sasuke, I promise. I don't take back my words, he said. That's my ninja way. Who's at Sasuke's house? Tsunade sighed, looking up at the Jounin who'd just appeared in her office. She hadn't decided how to go about Naruto's return, but she and Jiraiya both agreed that the fewer people that knew the better. They knew Naruto would want to leave as soon as possible once this was over, and if everyone knew he was alive it would make it more than a little difficult for him. It was bad enough, Sasuke knew. The young man had taken the news of Naruto's death extremely hard, and they all knew he blamed himself. Now that he knew Naruto was alive, Tsunade wondered if he'd let him go easily. Who did Sasuke say was at his house? She asked carefully. If Kakashi didn't know, she certainly wasn't going to enlighten him. A temporary visitor. Yes, Tsunade said, going back to her paperwork. That's who he is. What's his name? He's got a Konoha Hitaiate. Should we know him? He's a temporary visitor, Kakashi. Just leave it at that. The Jounin frowned. completely unsatisfied. There was a poof and Sasuke appeared, only recognizable by his fox Umbu mask. Sasuke. Tsunade nodded in acknowledgement. She looked around. Where's? Was he supposed to come? Sasuke asked. You left him alone? Tsunade said, standing quickly. He'll run. He's not going anywhere, Sasuke said firmly. How do you know? He gave me his word, Sasuke said. Tsunade stilled. A man's words should never be taken back. I won't take my words back. That is my ninja way. Fine, she said, taking her seat. Kakashi, although he remained silent, watched the exchange with great interest. Jiraiya walked into the office, ignoring the door and opting to use the hole Sasuke had made the night before. Tsunade, everyone's gathered for the meeting. Kakashi, having just appeared in her office, hadn't noticed the large gaping hole until then. What happened to your wall? Your former student and your crazy jutsu, Tsunade said, standing and walking to Jiraiya. Kakashi looked quickly at Sasuke, who stood with his arms crossed. His Umbu mask made him look anything but repentant. Sasuke had used Chidori last night. What was going on? Come on, Jiraiya said, stepping back through the hole. Sasuke moved to follow, saying nothing and grimacing behind his mask as his ribs ached. Hold on, Tsunade said, raising a hand. Sasuke, come here. The Umbu walked slowly to her. When he stood in front of her, she frowned. Take off your robes. Jiraiya and Kakashi watched in confusion. Sasuke took off his robes, revealing the standard Umbu uniform, a silver-colored sleeveless shirt over top a high-necked black one and black pants. Black arm protectors were pulled up to his biceps, leaving just enough of his arm exposed to show the Umbu tattoo. Sasuke didn't remove his mask. Lifting his shirts, Tsunade looked at the bandages. What happened? She asked, placing her hand lightly on his wrapped torso. We had a spar, was his answer. The hesitation wasn't missed by anyone in the room. Rough spar, Tsunade commented. He broke 2 of your ribs. Kakashi's eyebrow rose. So that man had injured Sasuke. Getting hurt was a rare occurrence for Sasuke since the emergence of the third wheel of his Sharingan. Tsunade and Jiraiya looked grim. Sasuke said nothing. Tsunade's hand began to glow and Sasuke could feel the warmth of her chakra. When the glow stopped, the pain was gone. After pulling his robes back on, Sasuke bowed. Arigato, Tsunade-sama. She nodded and they made their way out of the office, heading to the meeting. Kakashi followed, watching Sasuke, now more curious than ever. Naruto wondered what Sasuke did in his free time. His house was scarcely furnished, there was no TV to speak of, and the house was immaculate almost to the point that it felt unlived in, so it wasn't even like he could clean to pass the time. But Naruto knew Sasuke. At least, he had 10 years before, and it wasn't far-fetched to assume that all of his free time was spent training. Training was never a bad idea, Naruto concluded, and, after making sure his hair and face were covered, he made his way to the training grounds across rooftops. The only indication that he was moving was the faint breeze the villagers felt as he passed. He landed soundlessly on the grass at the training grounds, looking around. It wasn't much different from the years before. Yelling drew his attention to the far end of the field. I will not let you have him, forehead girl, a blonde woman with her hair pulled into a high ponytail screamed. Ino wore the exact same thing she did when she was younger, but she had a chunin vest on. Shut up, Ino pig, he'd never love you. Naruto nearly groaned. They were still fighting over Sasuke? Did they not get his complete lack of interest in anyone? Then again, he thought with a frown, it had been 10 years. Maybe Sasuke was interested in one of them, or someone else. He knew nothing of the raven-haired man's life. Naruto almost fell over at the next words from the women. Lee is mine, Ino pig. Sakura still looked the same. She'd grown her pink hair long again after Sasuke had left Konoha when they were 12, and it cascaded down to the small of her back now, same as it had when they were 16. Her attire was different. She still wore a sleeveless dress, similar in style to her old one, but it was a deep navy blue and went well with the chunin vest she wore over top of it. He smiled at the sight of the vest. He was glad for her. But they were fighting over Lee? Ino paused at Sakura's words. Lee? I don't want Lee, but I won't let you have Shikamaru. Naruto had to physically bite his lip to stop himself from laughing. Shikamaru. Why would I want that lazy jounin? Ino sighed, twisting a strand of her hair from her long ponytail around a finger. Sakura, this doesn't work when we're not fighting over the same guy. The strawberry-haired girl laughed. You're right. Let's just spar. Naruto watched the women fight. They used mostly taijutsu, but occasionally they would use basic techniques, replacements, or clones. Sakura's skills had improved since he'd last seen her. She was excellent at using the clones and replacements to get in close to Ino and attack. Ino, however, had wonderful reaction time and managed to slash the pink-haired woman's arm with a kunai. Naruto was surprised they were getting so vicious. Leaping back, Sakura pulled out several shuriken and sent them flying at Ino, who dodged, but was taken by surprise when Sakura followed the throwing stars, coming at her with a kunai. Using her kunai to block, they remained clashed, struggling against one another. Finally, Ino ducked, kicking her foot out and swiping Sakura's legs from under her. Sakura landed on her back with a loud thump. That hurt, Ino pig, Sakura said from the ground. Naruto watched her sit up and place a glowing hand onto her slashed arm, healing it. So Tsunade must have continued with her training. Ino shrugged. You're the one who wanted to work on your inside guard, forehead girl. Yeah. Let's try again, Sakura said, rolling her eyes and looking away. It was then her eyes fell on Naruto, and she started in surprise. Hello, she called, waving him over. Naruto thought about running away, but even he could see how suspicious a stranger running off would look. Shoving his hands into his pockets, he walked over to the two women. Hey, he said, nodding at them. Ino walked over and stood next to Sakura. Naruto raised an eyebrow as the blonde gave him a once-over. Do you need the training grounds? Sakura asked, staring into his brilliant blue eyes. They were so much like, no, I was just going to work over there, he said, jabbing a thumb over his shoulder. So you were being a hentai and watching two sweaty women fight it out? Ino asked, grinning. Ino, Sakura said, while Naruto spluttered. Ignore her, she said to him. I don't think I've seen you around before. I'm just visiting for a bit, Naruto said. But you have a Konoha Hitaiate, Ino pointed out. Naruto shrugged. I travel a lot. Sakura and Ino exchanged glances, but made no comment. So do you want to spar with us? Sakura asked. Oh no, what level are you? Ino asked, noticing he had no vest to distinguish his skill level. Naruto paused. What level was he indeed? Well, technically, I'm a Chunin. He wondered vaguely what had happened to his vest after he'd left. Perfect, Sakura said. We'll be evenly matched. No, I don't think. What's the matter? Ino asked. Afraid you'll be beaten by two girls? Naruto smiled. Much about him may have changed in the past 10 years, but his competitive nature had never completely diminished. All right, let's go. The women backed off and Naruto found himself between them. One could consider 2-on-1 unfair, but Naruto knew at this point he was definitely higher than the Chunin level. Okay, Sakura, let's go, Ino said, raising her arms. One hand was fisted and pulled close to her for a guard. The other was open, her palm facing him. Right, Sakura said, dropping into her fighting stance. Naruto remained relaxed. You ladies done encouraging each other? He was standing sideways in order to keep them both in his line of vision. They both growled and ran towards him, remarkably similar. They seemed to be able to gauge one another's thoughts, for as Sakura aimed a punch for his face, Ino lowered herself to kick his legs out from under him. He blocked the punch with his left arm and leapt above Ino's legs. He flipped away, placing both women in front of him. They were both surprised. They'd expected to at least connect one hit. With an almost imperceptible nod to one another, they went at him again, opting to attack with speed. They did outnumber him, so he wouldn't be able to block everything they threw at him. They rushed him, using quick combos that he simply blocked, using one hand per woman. His speed and reflexes were amazing, and Sakura had to duck and roll away when he freed himself from Ino's attack and decided to attack her. Using his distraction with Sakura to her advantage, Ino planted her right foot into the ground, spinning and aiming a devastating roundhouse kick to his abdomen. She and Sakura could only blink when he turned and caught her by the ankle, using her momentum to spin her and toss her away into Sakura. They both hit the ground painfully. Groaning, Ino sat up, and Sakura pushed the blonde off her lap. He's too fast, Ino panted, rubbing her ankle. He might even be Sasuke-kun's speed. They looked over to the man, who was waiting for them to get up. He's not even winded, Ino said. Sakura nodded, wiping the sweat from her face, leaving a dirt smudge across her cheek. We need a way to slow him down, she said. Give up, he called to them. Leave it to me, Ino said with a grin, struggling to her feet. We'll need a distraction, though. Sakura smiled. I'll see what I can do. Naruto watched them closely. It seemed they'd stopped underestimating him and had begun to plan something. Sakura suddenly ran at him, pulling out 2 kunai. Whoa, getting serious are we, he said. She leapt into the air, tossing 1 kunai at him. He jumped away, keeping his eyes on her as she flew over his head, ready to throw other kunai. He kept his back to Ino, for he didn't sense her coming closer. What he failed to notice was the blonde on her knees, her fingers ready in a seal. When Ino slumped forward and the man stilled, Sakura cheered. Landing gracefully on the grass, she pocketed her kunai and pulled out some rope. Now to tie the guy up. Something wasn't right. Ino watched as thousands of images, presumably the man's memories, blurred past her too fast for her to see. Abruptly, the colors stopped and she was left in darkness. What was going on? Why didn't she have control over his body? She was beginning to panic. She couldn't see anything, and without the use of the man's fingers, she couldn't return to her body. Suddenly, a low breathing filled her hearing. She whirled around, heartbeat quickening. Who's there? There was a clicking noise, reminiscent to a cat's claws on tile, as it prowled the kitchen. Her breaths were fast now. Are you afraid? A deep voice asked from the darkness. She trembled. The voice seemed to come from every direction at once. Who are you? She asked firmly, ignoring her shaking hands. Ino, a gentle voice said. She whipped around to see the man she was fighting. He was all she could see. Everything else remained black. What's going on? She asked. You shouldn't be here, he said. As she watched, the darkness behind him began to glow, and suddenly there were 2 huge, fiery eyes behind them, their burning gaze directed at her. She backed away in fear, biting back a scream. Foolish girl, the first voice said. You can't possess the possessed. With that, she felt a horrible jolt, and her consciousness flew back to her own body. Sakura looked at her in surprise. She was just moving to tie him up. Ino scrambled backwards, trying to distance herself from the man, who was shaking himself from a daze. What are you? She whispered. Sakura gaped at her, rope hanging loosely in her hands. The man's soft blue eyes met her frightened gaze, his expression unreadable under the mask. Thanks for the spar, he finally said. I need to get going. Ino and Sakura watched him walk away, before leaping into the trees and out of their sight. What was that all about? Sakura asked. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Naruto berated himself, heading back to Sasuke's. How could I forget that crazy skill of Ino's? He didn't know who knew about Kyuubi. Maybe after his death, it had become common knowledge? If that was the case, it wouldn't take long for Ino to figure out who he was, especially if she got Sakura's opinion. Alighting on Sasuke's roof, he leapt down and into an open living room window. Sasuke was pacing the living room. His robes were draped over the couch, and his fox mask was tossed in the armchair next to it. How was the meeting? Naruto asked. Sasuke turned towards him, looking angry. Naruto stepped back towards the window, ready to make an escape if needed. Where were you? I went training, Naruto responded. I didn't know I was confined to the house. Sasuke seemed to calm down. Sorry, he mumbled. Sasuke, I told you. I'm not going anywhere yet. Sasuke nodded and began to walk towards the kitchen. Sasuke, Naruto said, calling the other man's attention back to him. Who from our generation knows that? He wasn't sure how to phrase the question. Kyuubi, he finally said. Sasuke frowned at him. Only me and Shikamaru, as far as I know. Shikamaru. Sasuke had seen it enough times to put 2 and 2 together. But how would Shikamaru know? He was your commanding officer enough that it was information he needed to be aware of. Naruto nodded, thinking. So no one else knows? Not even Sakura? Sasuke shook his head. We were forbidden to talk about it, even after your death. What? He watched Naruto suspiciously, trying to gauge what he was thinking. No reason. Naruto said cheerfully. Just wondering. Can we eat lunch? He walked past Sasuke and into the kitchen. Sasuke stared after him, finally following him. Naruto was balancing on the back 2 legs of his chair when Sasuke walked into the kitchen. You seem better, Naruto commented, watching him move with ease. Tsunade. Sasuke grunted as an explanation. Sasuke-kun. A familiar feminine voice rang through the house. Shit, Naruto said, startled to hear her. He lost his balance and fell backwards, landing in a clatter on the floor. Sasuke rolled his eyes at Naruto before looking into the living room to see Sakura standing by the open window. Why did ninjas ignore the door? He needed to start locking his windows. Sasuke-kun. Sakura said, seeing him. There's a weird guy in the village, she said, walking towards him. He's very suspicious, and Ino says there's something in. There was a groan, and Sakura paused, looking towards the floor where Naruto was pulling himself into a sitting position. She gasped. You, she said. What are you doing here? Are you trying to kill Sasuke? Naruto stood and twisted his neck, cracking it with a loud pop. Both Sasuke and Sakura flinched. Riding the chair, he sat down, looking up at them. Catching from Naruto's expression that he wasn't going to be much use in this conversation, Sasuke spoke up. Sakura, he's staying with me for a while. He what? Sakura asked, dumbfounded. There was a pause. Sasuke-kun, can I talk to you for a minute? Sasuke looked at Naruto, who appeared to be feigning innocence under his mask. With a sigh he followed Sakura onto the living room. Naruto could hear them talking in low tones. A few minutes later he heard the sound of the door, and when Sasuke returned to the kitchen, he was alone. So that's why you wanted to know if anyone knew about Kyuubi. Naruto shrugged. You apparently scared the shit out of Ino, Sasuke told him. Maybe next time she'll think twice about poking around in people's heads. Naruto, Sasuke paused. Last night, when you didn't dodge the Gakakyu no Jutsu. What happened? Naruto looked up. What does it look like? He asked, sounding genuinely curious. What? Sasuke asked. When Kyuubi surfaces. I've never seen myself. So it was Kyuubi. What brought him out? He's a fire fox, Naruto said with an air of the obvious. Fire calls him out. I'll never need to dodge it, because fire is my element. But, Sasuke said, if fire brings him out, wouldn't you want to dodge? To keep him in. He never comes out to stay in battle. But what if he tries to? He has. I don't let him, Naruto said. Besides, he knows if he tries to come out I'll fight him, and if that happens during battle it's likely I'll get killed. He shares my death, and is intelligent enough not to distract me in a battle. You have control over him? Sasuke asked. Naruto snorted, stretching his arms over his cloth-covered head. I would never be so bold as to claim I have control over Kyuubi. Especially. He stopped abruptly, closing his eyes. Especially what? Sasuke pressed. Naruto became still and tense, not answering him. Sasuke wasn't even sure he had heard him. Naruto. Trying to prove a point? Naruto muttered, and with a foreboding feeling in the pit of his stomach Sasuke wondered if he was even talking to him. Naruto stood abruptly, knocking the chair away in the process. Sasuke felt a sudden burst of power from the other man. Naruto's hands clutched his head, and he began to grind his teeth. Sasuke took a step towards him, but stopped as red chakra flared up, warning him to stay away. Sasuke watched wide-eyed as Naruto doubled over as if he'd been punched in the stomach and opened his eyes. The regularly sky-blue eyes were now a violent purple, flashing now and then between their normal color and a fiery red. Naruto, Sasuke said, stepping closer. Stay back. Naruto, or perhaps Kyuubi, cried. Sasuke did as he was told. Bastard. Fox. Naruto growled through clenched teeth. Go back where you belong. With a rush of air the red chakra was suddenly pulled inside Naruto, the force sending him flying forward into Sasuke. Sasuke was only able to catch the other man and use his body to soften the fall they were about to take. He landed with a thud on his back, arms around Naruto as they slid across the kitchen floor. For a moment they both lay still, Naruto panting quietly against Sasuke's chest. What was that? Sasuke finally asked, making no attempt to move. That, Naruto said, still struggling for breath, is the reason I've been pretending to be dead for 10 years. 10 years earlier, Tsunade sadly ran her hand through the brilliant blonde locks of the 15-year-old boy lying still in his hospital bed. In the room next door lay another boy, who was being watched over by a pink-haired girl, whose expression was similar to Tsunade's as she ran her fingers through jet black hair. 2 days ago the boys had finally come to clash after their only real fight 3 years before. Their first fight had ended in disaster, leaving the blonde injured and unconscious and the dark-haired boy a missing nin. For 3 years they trained, and no one but their sensei, two of the three legendary Sannin, knew the extent of their powers. Konoha had been on alert for years, ever since Orochimaru's first attack on the village. Naruto and Jiraiya had returned to the village only a week before Orochimaru's giant snakes invaded and sound ninjas attacked. The first reports of the attack came to Tsunade when she was in a meeting with Naruto, discussing his training. Gunma had teleported into her office, a toothpick dangling precariously from his mouth as he explained that two of their gates had been broken through. She ordered him to tell the Chunin that their first priority was to get the villagers to safety and to have the Jounin fend off those at the gates. Gunma had only left moments before the Hokage tower began to shake. Naruto. Tsunade had called as the building moved precariously. Her first instinct was to protect the boy. The 15-year-old moved from position in front of the desk, in a flash, grabbing her and leaping out of the window as the tower collapsed. Setting her to her feet, they watched the tower fall, clouds of smoke rising as the rubble hit the ground. Tsunade, Naruto, Jiraiya called, running to their sides. They could hear the laugh before they could see the man. The coo that they would recognize anywhere. A giant snake slithered into view, tail wrapped around what used to be the base of the tower, the end flicking carelessly. Two ninjas stood on its head. As the smoke cleared, they could see them clearly. The taller of the two had white hair, although his face was still quite young. The glare of the sun off his glasses hid his eyes from view, but they all recognized Kabuto. The shorter figure laughed again. It's been a while, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Naruto. It was Sasuke's face, Sasuke's body, but the gravely voice emanating from his lips, that was Orochimaru's voice. Naruto hung his head, clenching his fists. He was too late. Tsunade-sama, a voice called. 5 Umbu were suddenly between her and Orochimaru. Go, she said. I don't need your protection. Help the villagers. The Umbu hesitated before bowing quickly and heading into various parts of the village. Let's end this, Orochimaru. Jiraiya called. Yes, Orochimaru said. It's finally time. Tsunade tensed for battle. She'd been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Naruto, stay back, she said, cracking her knuckles. Not a chance in hell, Tsunade Baba, he growled. Naruto, you can't fight him, she cried. Tsunade, Jiraiya's rough voice cut in. Let him fight. Jiraiya, he could be killed. Tsunade, the white-haired man said angrily. He won't be fighting alone. She sighed. Be careful, Naruto. Don't worry, the blonde growled. Tsunade-sama, a smooth voice said. Kabuto stood in front of them, a good 20 feet away. While I would prefer to fight Naruto-kun, to repay him for our last meeting, Orochimaru-sama has requested that I fight you. Tsunade looked at Naruto, expecting him to say something very loud and very brash to Kabuto, and was surprised to see him standing with his arms crossed, watching him with an expression that bordered on disinterest. His 3 years of training had certainly calmed him down, she thought. I still owe you for our last fight, Tsunade said to him. Your cheap tricks with blood aren't going to work this time. She rushed at him, and their fight began. Well, Jiraiya, I guess it's our turn, Orochimaru said through Sasuke's mouth. Angrily, Jiraiya bit his thumb, drawing blood. Recognizing the seals, he began to perform. Naruto placed a hand on the older man's arm. Arrow Sennin. If you summon Gamma Bunta, half of the village will be destroyed before the fight is over. Coo, came the laugh from above them. Looks like the brat's lost some of his brashness over the years. Both Naruto and Jiraiya glared up at him. Orochimaru. Naruto cried. I swear I will kill you before the day is over. He laughed again. Not much smarter though, is he? Naruto and Jiraiya suddenly attacked, the boy leaping to a building and onto the snake's head while Jiraiya ran up the snake's body, using chakra to stick to the snake's scaly skin. Orochimaru attacked with his tongue, a sight that almost made Naruto sick as it flew from Sasuke's mouth. Naruto ignored the feeling and flipped away from the tongue, which moved in an arc towards Jiraiya. The white-haired man dodged. He looked towards Sasuke's, no, Orochimaru's bandaged arms. If he could just get in close. The tongue was too long to allow for close-range fighting. Naruto, he called. After 3 years of training together, the boy knew what he wanted and quickly executed. Kagebushin no Jutsu. 50 Narutos suddenly surrounded Orochimaru, and with a loud battle cry in unison, they all rushed him. Orochimaru laughed as he fought them off with his tongue. Still weak, he said, watching them poof into smoke. His eyes widened in surprise as one Naruto managed to dodge his tongue and getting close, a kunai in his hand. What? He said in surprise. As with a poof of smoke the orange-clad boy became Jiraiya. A henge. Orochimaru said. Raising the kunai, Jiraiya lunged at Orochimaru. Jiraiya's big mistake was assuming his arms were still useless. He looked in shock as Sasuke's face twisted into a manic grin. Orochimaru grabbed Jiraiya's wrist, stopping the kunai inches from his face. Still as stupid as ever, Jiraiya. Jiraiya tried to pull his arm away, but Orochimaru held him fast. With wide eyes, Jiraiya watched as Orochimaru began concentrating his chakra to his left hand. Naruto knew that skill. Haku's face suddenly came to him. Do you have someone who is important to you? Ero Sunin, he cried, taking off as Orochimaru's fist flew forward. It happened so quickly no one reacted for a long moment. Sakura had been looking for a place that she would be most useful. She no longer had her Genin team since Sasuke had run off and Naruto had been training. She herself had been training as well for the past 3 years under Tsunade-sama's guidance. Now she wanted to do what she could as a medical nin, although her skills were not as highly developed as Tsunade-sama's or Shizun's. Leaping onto a roof to get a better view of the chaos, she attempted to see who was in most immediate need of help. She was not prepared for the sight before her. A loud scream of Naruto broke the silence that had descended over Jiraiya and Orochimaru. Sakura stood on the roof next to them, gaping open-mouthed and horrified. Sasuke was standing on the head of a giant snake, holding Jiraiya-san's wrist immobile with one hand, his other hand thrust through Naruto's right shoulder. Naruto coughed, blood spraying on Sasuke's white-wrapped arms. Sasuke seemed to recover from the surprise and started laughing. What was wrong with his voice? Jiraiya stared at the hand in front of him, the hand that had gone straight through Naruto's chest, the hand that was meant for him. Blood dripped from Orochimaru's fingers and down the orange jacket. Releasing Jiraiya's hand, Orochimaru braced his free hand on the boy's chest, unceremoniously pulling his fist out of him. Jiraiya caught Naruto as he crumpled. Naruto! Tsunade cried from the ground. She went to rush for him, but was blocked by Kabuto. You're not done here, Tsunade-sama. Get out of my way, she screamed, but was forced to dodge as he concentrated his chakra to his hands and lunged, trying to cut her muscles. You okay, Ero Sunin? The boy in Jiraiya's arms asked in a soft voice. He coughed up some more blood. How he could even talk was beyond the older man. Naruto, you baka. Why did you do that? Jiraiya asked, eyes wide in horror. I don't want to watch those dear to me die before my eyes. Neither of them noticed the flash in Orochimaru's eyes at the words. He shook his head as if to clear it. Naruto slipped from consciousness, and Orochimaru began to laugh. It seems like all your students end up dying, Jiraiya. Jiraiya's hands began to shake in anger. He leapt to the roof Sakura stood on and gently lay Naruto down, then turned and leapt back to the snake's head, preparing to end this. My host doesn't seem too pleased with me, Orochimaru said in amusement. There's quite a stir in the back corner of my mind where his consciousness lays. He's still within you? Jiraiya asked in surprise. Don't get any sentimental ideas, Jiraiya. He's trapped in there forever. Jiraiya sighed. So there was no way to save Sasuke. He would have died trying if there was. Naruto would have wanted it. Sharingan, Orochimaru said. Jiraiya grit his teeth as red eyes glared at him. Computer and video games. On the roof, tears streamed down Sakura's face as she used all that Tsunade had ever taught her to try and save Naruto. He wasn't dead yet, but the wound, the blood. She could feel his heart slowing as she worked, her hands glowing with chakra. Naruto, please hang on. There were loud crashes, and she looked up, watching with wide eyes as Sasuke and Jiraiya sent jutsu after jutsu at one another. She had never seen a battle with such skills, not even the battle of Kakashi and Zabuza compared. The slowing heartbeat under her fingers suddenly stopped. Naruto, she sent more chakra into him, desperately trying to restart his heart. No, she sobbed, trying again and again. An explosion rattled the building she was on, and standing up quickly, she saw that Sasuke had thrown Jiraiya-san with such a force he'd crashed into building, shaking it before the older man fell motionlessly to the ground. Tsunade was still fighting off Kabuto, although she now had a profound limp. Smoke was rising from everywhere in the village. Buildings collapsing were punctuated by screams, and from where she stood on the roof, she could see the bodies and blood littering the ground. She stared down at the blood coating her hands, then moved her gaze to Naruto, who lay motionlessly on the ground. She had failed. Clenching her hands into angry fists, she turned to face Sasuke, who had begun to laugh as he looked over the destruction of Konoha. After kneeling and kissing Naruto on his forehead, she stood back up, pulling a kunai from the pouch on her thigh. She wasn't strong enough, she knew. Sasuke had beaten Jiraiya-san, but she had to do something. Even if it killed her, she would not run away. Deep inside a dying boy, two great red eyes peered out of the darkness. "Oh no," the owner of the eyes said, almost amused. "This simply won't do. One day you're going to regret this, kid." The boy's heart had slowed so that it appeared to have stopped, but Kyuubi knew better. This kid lived on willpower alone, but that was enough. With red chakra swirling around the blonde boy's body, the hole in his shoulder began to repair, just as it had 3 years before. "Sasuke-kun," Sakura screamed. The raven-haired boy looked at her, raising an eyebrow. "You killed him. You killed Naruto." Sasuke laughed that frightening laugh. "So he finally died." As Sakura watched, his eyes widened and flashed, and his hands flew to his head as if he were in pain. Suddenly he stopped and straightened, a manic grin on his face. "Oh my, you are angry indeed. What was he to you?" he said. Sakura was confused. It didn't seem as though Sasuke was talking to her. "Sasuke, you're a traitor. I can never forgive you," she cried, raising her kunai. Tsunade finally managed to get a chakra-filled punch directly to Kabuto's chest. Sending her chakra to specific points in his body, she was able to knock him unconscious. He wouldn't wake up for at least a week. Taking a moment to look around, she noted the critical situation. She almost stopped breathing when she saw Sakura arm herself. "Sakura," she cried. "No, that's not Sasuke. You cannot defeat him." The pink-haired girl either didn't hear her or ignored her and rushed at Orochimaru. "Don't kid yourself, girl," Orochimaru said, waiting until she was close and backhanding her away. She flew with the sheer force of the hit, falling off the snake's head. "Computer and video games, Sakura," Tsunade yelled as she watched her apprentice begin to fall from 50 feet in the air. She couldn't make it to her in time. She could barely walk. A blur of orange and red whizzed by her, leaping into the air, catching the young woman in mid-fall. Tsunade stared in amazement as Naruto suddenly stood before her, placing Sakura, who had passed out, gently on the ground. He sped away, returning a few moments later with the limp Jiraiya over his shoulder, setting him next to Sakura. Tsunade couldn't speak. Naruto's horrible wound was gone. The only indication it had ever been there was the large rip in his jacket. He was surrounded by red chakra, and his features had taken on the look of a fox. His eyes were red and narrowed, his teeth long and fang-like, and his nails had lengthened into claws. "Heal them, Tsunade Baba. I'll take care of this." "Naruto," she called as he walked away. "I'll be okay," he said, glancing back at her over his shoulder, sending her a vicious grin. She sighed, looking at Jiraiya's beaten form. Laying her palms on his chest, she began to heal him, keeping her eyes on Naruto. The boy leapt back up to the snake's head, staring down Orochimaru with his arms crossed. "So you're not dead?" "Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated," Naruto growled. "The fox has emerged. At least now you'll be a fun fight." Orochimaru laughed, and then paused, a faraway look in his eyes. "Your friend seems to want you to run away. He seems quite attached to you. Got very emotional when you were announced dead." The news of Sasuke's consciousness had been shared to shock and surprise Naruto, and hopefully to weaken him. He wouldn't hurt Sasuke's body if he thought there was a chance the boy could be returned to it. So when Naruto heard this and his lips twisted into a feral grin, fangs showing menacingly, Orochimaru was surprised, to say the least. "You can tell him that he should know by now that Uzumaki Naruto never runs away. I'm still weak from having his hand rammed through my chest, and I'm spending most of my energy right now." trying to stop QB from taking over my body and killing everyone that isn't dead already. So if he'd really like for me not to die, he'd better reclaim his body, because I'm not going to win, but I sure as hell am not going to run. Coo coo coo. Orochimaru laughed. Well, at least you're realistic, he said. You aren't going to win. He began powering up the Chidori. This seems like a fitting way for you to die. It'll be as if it really is Sasuke ramming his hand through your heart. Naruto said nothing. Jiraiya awoke to see Tsunade hovering over him worriedly. Naruto, he gasped, sitting up. He's alive, Jiraiya, Tsunade said quickly, pointing up to where the two possessed boys stood. They watched Orochimaru power up Chidori and begin to run at Naruto, who stood firm, his arms still crossed. He's not dodging, Tsunade said with a gasp. Jiraiya tried to get up to go to him, but he was too weak and couldn't stand. Naruto, dodge, he screamed from his knees. But Naruto didn't move. Orochimaru drew closer, and Tsunade and Jiraiya watched in amazement as the Chidori suddenly went out like a candle being snuffed. Orochimaru fell to his knees, hands gripping Sasuke's hair. A loud scream wrenched from his lips. This can't be happening, he cried. Then his voice changed to a different tone, no more gentle, but there was a younger, less gravelly quality to it. It was a voice Naruto knew well, slightly deeper than the last time he heard it, but it was the same voice. Get out of my body, he screamed. There was a surge of power and a scream of outrage, and as they watched the chakra swirl up around Sasuke's body, they could suddenly see the shadowy shape of a human being pulled from the boy's chest. It appeared to be trying to hold on, but it was thrust from his body and disappeared. Sasuke fell forward, to all fours, panting. The raven-haired boy looked up, red eyes having returned to their normal deep gray. He saw the blonde standing above him, surrounded by red chakra. Naruto, he said. With what looked like considerable trouble, the blonde managed to stop the red chakra, and when he opened his eyes again, they were the bright blue Sasuke was used to. Naruto smiled down at him. Sasuke, he said, I knew you could do it. With that, he collapsed, no longer able to remain standing without the strength of the Kyuubi. Sasuke moved swiftly, with energy he didn't know he had left, to catch the boy as he fell, cradling him gently. Naruto, he said, shaking him lightly. Naruto. Without his summoner the snake, they stood on grew impatient, and with a poof it was gone. With nothing under his feet, Sasuke quickly jumped to the roof next to him before leaping to the ground. He was unable to go any further, and he sat down heavily, still holding the blonde close, rocking back and forth. When Tsunade and Jiraiya reached him, he was crying, mumbling, Gomen Nasai, into Naruto's hair. It took a sleep jutsu before he would relinquish his hold on the boy. 3 days later, Naruto awoke in the hospital. No one was aware of his condition except for Tsunade and Jiraiya, not even Kakashi or Iruka, who came by every day only to be told they could be given no information about either of their former students. Sasuke was still unconscious, his body needing time to recover from the strain being possessed had put on it. Orochimaru was assumed dead, his soul having nowhere to go once Sasuke had vanquished him. When Naruto had woken, Tsunade had hugged him tightly, relieved he was all right. She let him go when he didn't hug back. Tsunade Baba, he said softly, staring at his hands. It almost took over that time. Naruto, she said worriedly. Kyuubi, he said, and then paused. I've never been that close to losing myself. The killing intent, the power. If I had given in for even an instant, everyone in the village would be dead. I almost couldn't stop him. But you did, Naruto, you stopped him. He's been trying more often, the boy said. He what? I can constantly feel him poking in my consciousness. He waits, Tsunade, waits until I'm relaxed, until I'm off guard. Usually when I'm sleeping. Then he tries to take over. He wants out. Tsunade was shocked at the information. Why hadn't Naruto ever told her? She swallowed. This was a difficult development. You can fight him, Naruto, she finally said. What happens if I can't? I can't take that chance. When he saved my life, he told me I'd regret it. I can feel him already, Tsunade. He took that opportunity, when I was weakest, and wove himself deeper into me. He's just right beneath the surface now. He's trying to meld us. Tsunade didn't know what to say. She was the Hokage, but she had no idea what to do. This was a problem where no answers seemed apparent. Naruto continued. I have to leave the village. What? Tsunade cried. I can't be here if Kyuubi manages to take over. I will not put people I care about at risk. Naruto, if you leave, you'll be considered a missing nin, Tsunade told him. There's got to be a way, Tsunade Baba, he said. He pleaded. In the end, it was Jiraiya that came up with the idea to tell everyone Naruto was dead. No one knew his condition. It wouldn't be far-fetched to say he died from his injuries. The older man had wanted to go with the boy, but Naruto had refused. Both Sannin wondered how. He planned to conceal himself, for his looks caused him to stick out quite a bit. But he'd tied his hitayate over his telltale blonde locks and pulled a mask over his wicker marks, so his only defining feature left was his blue eyes, which didn't seem to shine as they once had. When he appeared before them one last time, his face and hair covered, and wearing navy blue and black colors rather than his normal bright orange jumpsuit, they sadly had to admit he was not easily recognizable. Before he left, he had turned to Tsunade. Tsunade-sama, he said. The respectfulness of his voice and the name left both Sannin wide-eyed. Don't punish Sasuke. Please. There was nothing she could say, but I won't. Then, with a nod and a wave, he was gone, and Tsunade had to go inform everyone who cared about him of his death. Sasuke rolled over again, laying on his back and glaring up at the ceiling of his room as if it was the reason he was unable to sleep. He'd been so close to getting the answers he'd been searching for since Naruto's return. That is the reason I've been pretending to be dead for 10 years. Naruto had been about to go on when there was a loud knock at Sasuke's door. Immediately, Naruto clammed up. Sasuke could feel the difference. Pulling himself into a sitting position, Naruto stood. Offering his hand to Sasuke, he pulled the dark-haired man to his feet. The knocking became more insistent. Uchiha-san, they could hear from the other side of the door. Without a glance back at Sasuke, Naruto made his way out of the kitchen and down the hallway of Sasuke's one-story house. Sasuke watched him disappear into the guest room across from his room with a sigh. Stalking to the door, he pulled it open with more force than he meant to, glaring icily at the visitor. Two jounin stood on his doorstep. Sasuke was unfamiliar with the one who had been knocking and calling his name. He was young, maybe 20. The jounin behind him stood a few feet away, a distinct look of disinterest on his face. Shino, Sasuke thought, was the only other man he knew whose expression could remain as impassive and indifferent as his own. Actually, he amended, Shino was probably better at it than he was, since Sasuke's expression could usually vary to angry and, on occasion, surprised. Shino rarely even twitched an agitated eyebrow. He stood now with his hands stuffed into his pockets, round sunglasses over his eyes. Uchiha-san, the first jounin said. We were patrolling, and we felt a large surge of chakra from your house. We wanted to be sure everything was all right. Sasuke almost snorted in amusement. The young jounin looked extremely anxious, and Shino looked anything but concerned. He actually looked bored. Everything's fine, Sasuke said, sending a look of annoyance at the jounin. He paused, practicing Chidori. In your house? The young man asked. He had heard tales of Chidori's destructive power. Sasuke knew the lie was pretty bad when he saw Shino make the effort to raise an eyebrow. Deciding the best route to follow was the one that worked most often, he crossed his arms and glared at both of them. Why is it suddenly your business what I do in my own house? The young jounin looked horrified to have pissed the umbu off. He stuttered out his next words. We just wanted to be sure nothing had happened, sir. I think, Sasuke sneered, that I am more than qualified to take care of myself, don't you? Yes, sir, the jounin stammered. Shino spoke, surprising them both. Sorry to bother you, Uchiha. He turned and walked away, and the young jounin took one look at Sasuke and quickly made his way after him. With a shake of his head, Sasuke closed the door and went in search of Naruto. As he headed down the hall towards the guest room, he passed the bathroom, and, hearing the gentle thrum of the shower, he realized he wouldn't get to talk to him until later. But when later came, Naruto brushed off the entire incident. He either ignored or changed the subject whenever Sasuke tried to bring it up, which was why Sasuke was now tossing in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. Heaving a frustrated sigh, Sasuke threw off the covers and climbed out of bed. He didn't flinch as his bare feet came into contact with the cool wooden floor, used to the feeling after so many years. He only slept in his shorts and didn't bother putting on a shirt as he padded out of his bedroom. He wasn't even sure where he was going, but he knew tossing in bed was getting him nowhere. As he walked by the guest room Naruto inhabited, he couldn't help but notice the faint light glowing under the door. Pausing, he listened carefully but could hear nothing to indicate Naruto was awake. The door wasn't shut completely, and Sasuke debated pushing it open slightly to see if Naruto was sleeping. He knew he could just knock, but he didn't want to wake him if Naruto was asleep. At least one of them should get some rest. Finally, he gave in, quietly pushing the door open just wide enough that he could peer in. Naruto sat in the middle of the floor, his back to the door. A small lamp sitting on the dresser that stood against the wall to his left softly illuminated the room. The other man appeared to be meditating. He was still fully dressed, including his arm wrappings, and Sasuke had to wonder if he ever changed. His face mask was pulled down, but his hair was still tied up under his hitayate. Opting not to disturb him, Sasuke reached for the handle, preparing to pull the door closed. "Need something, Sasuke?" Naruto said, not turning to look at him. Sasuke paused in surprise. "I was just wondering if you were up," he finally said. Naruto did turn to look at him then. The light of the lamp caused odd shadows to dance across the contours of his face and made it difficult to read his expression. Naruto stood, and his shadow stretched across the room, reminding Sasuke of Shikamaru's Kage-main no jutsu. "I told you I don't sleep much," Naruto said, turning from him and moving to sit on the bed that was in the corner of the room across from the dresser. "Well, I figured you'd take advantage of being here to get some rest," Sasuke told him, stepping through the door. "It's not like you'll get attacked in Konoha." Naruto snorted, catching Sasuke off guard. "It's not shinobi attacking me that I worry about," he said. "Then what?" Sasuke asked in confusion. There was a long pause as Naruto seemed to debate whether or not to tell him. "Today," Naruto finally began. "What happened in the kitchen? That was rare. Kyuubi was trying to prove a point. He rarely tries to overpower me when I'm fully aware." Sasuke had unconsciously moved further into the room. "When I said I only sleep for a few hours, that was a lie. I'll catch half an hour here and there, but usually I don't sleep at all. When I sleep is when he strikes." The first time I woke to find him weaving his essence through me was terrifying. It took everything I had to push him back. Every time he does it, a little more of him becomes a part of me. "He's trying to merge with you?" "Not trying," Naruto said, and when his blue eyes looked up at Sasuke in the dim light, he swore they looked haunted. Sasuke shook his head. "Don't be stupid, Dobe," he said, refusing to believe what Naruto said could possibly be true. Naruto growled at him, and Sasuke had to admit, the sound wasn't altogether human. "I'm not being stupid," he snapped. "It's not my imagination, and I'm not worrying over nothing." He turned away, refusing to look at Sasuke. "Forget it," he finally said. "I was stupid to think the great Uchiha Sasuke would understand." Sasuke felt his stomach clench at the words. Naruto had opened up to him, and he'd blown it. He hesitated before moving over to the bed and sitting next to Naruto, who turned from him, giving Sasuke a good view of his profile. Naruto, Gomen. He took the time to study Naruto's features. It seemed he never had much of an opportunity, since the other man kept his mask up as much as possible. The last time Sasuke had really seen him, Naruto was 12. That brief time in battle when they were 15 didn't really count. He wasn't exactly trying to get a good look at the boy. Naruto had lost his baby fat in exchange for muscle. He had a lean, yet athletic build. His chin and jaw line had become more angular. Sasuke frowned as he realized that he hadn't noticed that the whisker marks on Naruto's cheeks had grown more pronounced. They were wider and darker. "Why don't you ever take off your hitayate?" Sasuke asked. "My hair would give me away, don't you think?" Naruto said with a small smile. "There's no one here but me," Sasuke reminded him. "I know," Naruto answered quietly. There was a long silence before Sasuke spoke. "Can I see your hair?" Naruto looked at him in surprise, furrowing his eyebrows. "Why?" "Because I haven't seen it in 10 years, and I miss seeing the color." Naruto's eyes widened before he looked away. "I told you, it gives me away." "Naruto, I already know who you are," Sasuke said. It doesn't give away who I am. It gives away who I'm becoming. Sasuke frowned deeply at his words. Naruto reached up and slowly began to untie his Hitayate. Sasuke watched in silence as he pulled it off. Golden locks fell from the dark cloth, falling loosely around his face. They were longer than the last time Sasuke had seen them, and, taking in how they gently framed Naruto's face, Sasuke was reminded of the fourth Hokage. But more was different to Naruto's hair than just the length. Reaching a hand to gently finger the locks, he let a few strands of red hair fall through his fingers. Littered throughout the blonde strands were streaks of fiery red highlights. He looked questioningly at Naruto, who calmly allowed him to touch his hair. The more connected we become, the redder it gets, Naruto explained. It started out barely noticeable. He looked down, his expression almost seemed ashamed. When he spoke again, his voice cracked, and Sasuke could tell he was crying. I don't know what to do, Sasuke. I can't stop him. I'm tired. So tired. Sasuke's chest ached when Naruto started to sob. Reacting purely on instinct, he reached out and pulled Naruto to him, holding him while he sobbed into his shoulder. So what the hell's going on with Uchiha? Kiba asked, leaning his head back and downing a shot of sake. Kiba was wearing his Jounin uniform, and the red marks on his cheeks became more pronounced as his face flushed from the alcohol. Akamaru sat at his feet under the table, having grown too big to perch on Kiba's head years ago. What do you mean, Kiba? Rock Lee asked from the seat across from him. Lee had grown to look almost exactly like Guy. He wore the same green training suit he had when he was younger, and now he had a Jounin vest over it, just as his sensei wore it. The main difference between the two was Lee's round eyes, which gave him the look of perpetual innocence. The others at the round table looked to Kiba for explain. Since they had been old enough to drink, the group of genin that had taken their first Chunin exam together had been coming to the bar once a week to get together and catch up on one another's lives. They always inhabited a large round table in the back corner of the dark pub, away from the bustle that was always around the bar. The group varied from week to week. Sometimes people were on missions or had other duties, but they all came whenever their schedules allowed. Tonight, Kiba, Hinata, Choji, Shikamu, Ino, Lee, and Sakura sat around the table. They knew Kiba wasn't commenting on Sasuke not being there, because Sasuke was never there, not for lack of trying on Sakura's part. Since Naruto's death and Sasuke's return, the moody man had barely spoken to any of them unless it was in the context of a mission. Shino told me there was some weird surge of chakra from his house today, Kiba explained. Shikamaru saw Sakura and Ino exchange odd looks. Now what was that about? Kiba continued. When he and that new Jounin, the twitchy one, what's his name? Ritsu, Choji offered, stuffing a radish in his mouth. Yeah, Kiba said. They went to check if everything was okay, and he told him he had been practicing Chidori. In his house. Hinata asked in her soft voice. She looked as she always had. Her hair was the same short bob, and the only difference in her outfit was the Chunin vest that had taken the place of her old jacket. Yeah, Kiba said with a snort. I know. Shino also said the chakra didn't feel like Chidori at all. It didn't even feel like Uchiha's chakra. Maybe it was that guy, Sakura said to Ino. What guy? Lee asked the pink-haired woman next to him. Did Shino mention him? Sakura asked Kiba. Some strange masked guy is staying with Sasuke-kun. Whoa. Uchiha, the self-imposed introvert and all-around antisocial bastard, has some stranger staying with him. Kiba said. Sakura shrugged, ignoring the insults to Sasuke. The older she got, the less delusional she became. That's what he told me. This guy is really suspicious, though. Ino finally spoke up, and Shikamaru realized how quiet she had been until that point. Not suspicious, Sakura. Scary. Sakura looked at her sympathetically, and Shikamaru's curiosity was piqued. What do you mean, Ino? He asked. Everyone was looking at her curiously. With a sigh, she explained what had happened earlier that day. Shikamaru was the type of person who showed very little emotion, simply because it took too much effort for him to change his expression. So when Ino told her story and his eyes progressively widened, everyone at the table found themselves staring at him. What did this guy look like? He asked her. Well, we couldn't see his face. He had a mask on, and his Hitayate covered all of his hair, Ino said. Nodding and lost in thought, Shikamaru lifted his sake for a drink. The only thing I noticed about him was his bright blue eyes, Sakura said, almost sadly. Shikamaru choked on his sake and stood suddenly. I have to go, he said. Shikamaru, Choji said, looking up at him. See you later, he called over his shoulder before exiting the bar. What the hell was that about? Kiba asked as they all stared at the door Shikamaru had just left. Through. Sasuke awoke early the next morning to the smell of eggs. Sitting up and looking around in confusion, he realized he was in his guest room. He sighed, realizing that at some point last night, he must have fallen asleep. Naruto had eventually composed himself, and they'd moved off the subject of Kyuubi. Laying side by side on the bed, they told one another some of the things that had happened over the last 10 years. Sasuke stopped in his room to grab a shirt before entering the kitchen. Naruto stood at his stove scrambling eggs. His mask was down around his neck, and he'd put his hitayate back on. Hungry? Naruto asked when Sasuke walked in. Yeah, he answered, going to the cupboard and grabbing plates. Sorry I fell asleep, he said, holding the plates as Naruto dished out the eggs. I didn't expect you to stay up all night just because I do, Naruto said, setting the pan of eggs back on the stove and taking his plate from Sasuke. They had just sat down at the table and begun to eat when there was a knock on the door. Naruto grinned. You certainly get a lot of visitors. Sasuke set his fork down in exasperation. I've had more people come here in the last 2 days than I've had all year. Naruto laughed, taking another mouthful of eggs. He remained in the kitchen as Sasuke went to answer the door. Sasuke was surprised to pull open the door and see Shikamaru. He hardly talked to the Jounin, let alone received visits from him. Shikamaru, he said with a nod of acknowledgement. Sasuke, Shikamaru said in greeting. I came by to see Naruto. It was said so bluntly that all Sasuke could do was gape at him slack-jawed. Naruto, who had been listening, poked his head out of the kitchen to stare at Shikamaru, still holding his fork and wearing an expression startlingly similar to Sasuke's. Ohio, Naruto, Shikamaru said, looking past Sasuke to the disembodied head that was peeking out of the kitchen. Snapping his mouth shut, Naruto shrugged with smile. Ohio, Shikamaru. The 3 men sat around Sasuke's kitchen table, Naruto and Sasuke staring at Shikamaru as he ate some eggs. So, Sasuke finally said, how did you know? Ino goes into the mind of some strange guy with bright blue eyes and sees he's got something residing in him. The same day there's a strange surge of chakra coming from your house, where this guy happens to be staying. It doesn't take a genius to figure out. Naruto grinned. And since you are a genius, it must have been pretty simple for you. Shikamaru nodded. Did you tell anyone else? Sasuke asked. No, Shikamaru said. I figured that if it hasn't been made common knowledge, there's a reason. Yeah, Naruto said. If you could just keep it to yourself, it would be appreciated. Shikamaru nodded. So why go through all the trouble of pretending you're dead? He asked. Naruto tensed and Sasuke sent a glare at Shikamaru, who pointedly ignored him. It's a long story, Shikamaru, Naruto said with a forced smile. Shikamaru studied him for a moment, and Sasuke had every intention of throwing the Jounin out if he pressed the subject. He would not let Shikamaru upset Naruto, not after seeing him last night. Shikamaru didn't push it though, recognizing both Naruto's discomfort and Sasuke's rising ire. Shikamaru might have asked something else, but he was cut off by a poof of smoke above Naruto's head. When the smoke cleared, Sasuke and Shikamaru stared at the large orange frog that sat on Naruto's head. Naruto rolled his eyes upwards, but could only see the orange flippers that rested on his forehead. With a sigh, he said, Gamakichi, what did I tell you about popping up without being summoned? Big problems, kid, the frog said, ignoring him. Holding out his palms in front of him, Naruto allowed Gamakichi to jump into his hands. What's going on? He asked when the frog was facing him. Sasuke and Shikamaru noticed his serious tone. Akatsuki's moving towards Konoha, but on the way they are ransacking villages, destroying everything they can. What? Naruto exclaimed. Judging by their movements, their next target is a small village about 30 miles from here. Are you sure? Naruto said. Gamatatsu has been watching them like you asked. This is the only logical next move for them, Gamakichi told him. Naruto nodded. How long before they get there? 4 days, tops. That'll be enough time, Naruto said, apparently deep in thought. Enough time for what? Sasuke asked. To get there before they do, Naruto replied. He nodded to Gamakichi, who disappeared from his hands. Naruto stood. You can't be serious, Sasuke said, standing as well. Well, I'm certainly not joking, Naruto said. Don't be stupid. Sasuke growled angrily. You can't defeat all of Akatsuki by yourself. Naruto shrugged. I'll be fine. You said you would stay, Sasuke reminded him. I never said how long, Naruto countered. The Hokage ordered that you stay in Konoha. Sasuke moved to block the exit. Sasuke, I'm dead, remember? I'm not under her rules anymore. Now, if you don't get out of my way, I'll crack more than your ribs this time, Naruto said, incredibly calm. Shikamaru, who had been quietly watching the exchange, decided it might be time to interject. Naruto, taking on Akatsuki alone would be suicide. Surely you realize that. Naruto's gaze shifted to the ponytailed shinobi, but he said nothing. In fact, he suddenly looked a bit uncomfortable. It was then Sasuke realized what Naruto was thinking. He had realized. Striding across the kitchen so quickly Naruto didn't have a chance to react, he raised a fist and punched the whiskered man. Naruto's head whipped to the side, and he remained that way, refusing to meet Sasuke's accusatory glare. Don't you ever think like that again, Sasuke hissed angrily. Shikamaru could do nothing but gape at them. The tense silence pervaded in the kitchen until finally Shikamaru spoke. Perhaps we should speak to the Hokage about this. The two men turned to look at him. It's likely she'll send out a large team of shinobi to protect the village. Also, it will be a good indication of Akatsuki's strength. Naruto sighed, and then nodded, still not meeting Sasuke's eyes.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.